Hello, everyone. Good morning. I can't hear any response. Good morning. That sounds more like it. MEDays is a very exciting forum to come to. So usually when I say good morning, I like to hear a response. So you're welcome to the 15th edition of this amazing conversations we have every year about the developments in the global south. But most importantly, a conversation for Africans, by Africans, and for Africa. This morning, we are going to explore one of the most, exciting, but also quite worrying phenomena that has held the African continent, and indeed not just Africa, but other areas, of the globe to ransom, if you like. And this is the subject of separatism, terrorism, interference, and political instability. You may see on your program this is specific to Africa, but as I did indicate, this is not just an African problem. And we shall be exploring mechanisms and ways and strategies by which we can get out of this challenge that we currently have, across the continent. And as I did indicate, this is one of those phenomena that hinders, development in several respects. So over the next 1 hour or so, you can see my very eminent panel to my left. They will be answering, questions that border on the subject. But also, we want this to be as engaging a conversation as possible. And so we shall go through a series of questions, and then we shall open up for comments and questions as well from the audience towards the end. And so there's definitely an opportunity for you to also join, the conversation. In no particular order, I'd like to introduce my panel members at this point to you, so you know who is sitting before you in having this conversation with you. I have His Excellency C.D. Tunis. He's the Speaker of the ECOWAS Parliament and is from the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I'm sure you can see him. Please, if you can wait for them so they know that you're there, right? We also have His Excellency Anadif Mohammed Saleh. He's the Foreign Affairs Minister of the Republic of Chad. If you can just give us a wave. So there he is. We also have Her Excellency Asia Ben Salah Alaoui. She's the itinerant ambassador of His Majesty the King Mohammed VI of the Royal Kingdom of Morocco. A professor of international relations and international law. Please, some appreciation for her. And then we also have His Excellency Mr. Sheikh Gadio. He's the former Foreign Affairs Minister of Senegal and President of the Pan-African Institute of Strategies. Please, some appreciation for him. And we also have His Excellency Mohammed Abdirazak, also the former Foreign Affairs Minister for Somalia. Please put your hands together for him. So as you can see, I have current foreign affairs ministers and former foreign affairs ministers that will help us unpack, the subject of separatism, terrorism, interference, and political instability that we have, with the African continent. Today, you can't have this conversation or the subject, a discussion on this subject properly, so speaking, if you don't examine critically what currently is happening within the West African sub-region, which then means that we shall start off this conversation with His Excellency Tunis, who's the Speaker of Parliament of ECOWAS, and perhaps you can give us some insight, into the current state of, political instability, security, separatism that we have within the ECOWAS sub-region, because that has been one of the hotbeds, as far as the subject, is concerned.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. And good morning, everyone. And I bring you greetings from West Africa, ECOWAS. Mr. Moderator, our theme for this particular forum, Polycrisis, Polyworld, and of course, our topic, Separatism, Terrorism, Interference, and Political Instability in Africa, speak to the complex and interconnected nature of the challenges that we face in Africa today. As a representative of the people of West Africa, it is crucial that I acknowledge the challenges faced by our continent and region and the efforts taken to address these challenges. It is worth noting that these challenges are all interconnected. Political instability can create the atmosphere for conducive enough for rise in terrorism and separatist movements. We have seen that over and over in Africa. Similarly, interference from external actors can exacerbate political instability and undermine efforts to combat terrorism. These are multiple challenges that we'll continue to face in Africa. Mr. Moderator, in recent years, many African countries have witnessed a rise of separatism, some of which have begun to challenge existing political borders created during the colonial era. The demand for a new sovereign nation based on a unique national identity and historical relations continue to rise rapidly on the continent. For example, since 2016, the Biafra agitation for independence from Nigeria has been rekindled. We have the Ambazonia in the Anglophone Northwest and Southwest Cameroon continue to demand for a separate sovereign state from the French territory in Cameroon. Separatism, interestingly, sometimes it's not just about freedom and independence. In most cases that we have witnessed of late, it's about access to resources and the power to control the access to those resources, and of course, the sharing of the profit of those resources. When it comes to terrorism, Mr. Moderator, I believe terrorist groups' coordination is outperforming our efforts to stop them. In the Central Sahel region in West Africa, violent Islamist groups have become stronger over the years. Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso tri-border region is under the authority of and is the scene of attacks by both Islamic State and Al-Qaeda-related armed organizations. These organizations also have close links to international criminal organizations that prey on young people, including drug and gun traffickers. Mr. Moderator, to address issues of this nature, we must, as a matter of urgency, review our governance architecture and evaluate our strategies towards youth development. We'll come to that later on, maybe in the second round of this panel discussion. Mr. Moderator, the emergence of military coups and overthrow of democratic governments as recorded in Mali, Guinea, Burkina Faso, Chad, and most recently Niger and Gabon. The trajectory of efforts towards constitutional amendments in relation to presidential term limits and tenure elongation, the growing interference of the military in the political governance of the state, in contrast to the clear legal and constitutional framework defining the basic relationship between the state and the armed forces, are having a detrimental effect on regional peace, development, and security, and are impeding the consolidation of democracy and the rule of law and Africa's ongoing constitutional developments. How do we get out of the web of separatism, terrorism, and political instability? And what are we doing in ECOWAS to combat separatism, terrorism, interference, and political instability in the ECOWAS region? And what we, as members of parliament in the ECOWAS parliament, are doing about it? We'll have this conversation in the next round, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much for those reflections. I think it sets us up, you know. Yes, please do. Something gets said that you think is very interesting, please, by all means, do appreciate them for those thoughts. But there's a point you mentioned which I'll come back to. You talk about, you know, the role of governance, you know, good governance that is, at least within that, you know, sub-region, and how that, you know, helps us sort of fix the narrative and the problems going forward. Let me go to His Excellency, from Chad. You are from the West African sub-region. When you hear His Excellency Tunis, you know, make these points about, you know, interference, make these points about good governance, how do you see that, you know, from your perspective, you know, within the context of the subject that we have at hand?
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le modérateur. Je voudrais d'abord, de prime abord, féliciter et remercier les responsables de MEDays pour l'invitation, les encourager pour ce forum de dialogue Sud-Sud, parce que plus que jamais, le Sud-Sud a besoin d'un dialogue, a besoin de concertation, a besoin de plus de force pour peser sur ce qui est en train de se faire. Et quand on voit le titre de cette édition, l'actualité nous donne des raisons d'inquiétude. Quand on voit que le Conseil de sécurité, qui est le symbole même du multilatéralisme, a mis près de 40 jours pour s'entendre sur les termes d'une seule résolution pour ce qui est en train de se passer à Gaza. Les petits États, le Sud de façon globale, l'Afrique, le Sahel, ont raison de s'interroger de ce qu'ils peuvent attendre de ce monde. Et donc, l'instabilité, c'est la conséquence de tout cela. L'instabilité, parce que si je prends ne serait-ce que vous m'avez parlé de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, aujourd'hui la menace dont a parlé tout à l'heure mon frère, c'est un peu la menace terroriste. Or, elle est la conséquence des décisions, justement, malheureusement, qui ont été prises ailleurs et que nous, pour le moment, gérons les conséquences. Parce que quand on parle d'Al-Qaïda, quand on parle de l'État islamique, je suis de ceux qui ont toujours dit que ce n'est pas une fabrication africaine, ce n'est pas une fabrication du Sahel, elles viennent d'ailleurs. Et dernièrement, j'avais participé à une réunion qui a regroupé une coalition qui s'appelle la Coalition pour la lutte contre l'État islamique. Et les gens disaient que, bon, nous avons presque vaincu l'État islamique, mais je leur ai posé la question simple de savoir, mais les gens que vous avez vaincus, est-ce que vous savez là où ils partent? Il y a un espace en Afrique qui s'appelle le Sahel, le Sahara, qui est un espace vide, sous-peuplé, et ces gens-là partent vers cet espace. Et donc le terrorisme, c'est vous qui l'importez vers l'Afrique. Et pour le moment, moi je le conçois comme une menace globale, vous le percevez comme une menace uniquement des pays ouest-africains ou sahéliens. Je crois qu'il est temps de voir cette menace dont vous êtes à l'origine et de pouvoir aider les pays à l'éradiquer. Et donc, il faut plutôt compter sur la coopération sud-sud, sur ce dialogue sud. Nous sommes dans un monde malheureusement d'opposition d'intérêts. Et rien n'est gratifié. La bonne gouvernance dont a parlé le frère tout à l'heure est un élément important. C'est à nous de dégager notre voie. Et des dialogues de ce genre qui nous réunissent sont un élément extrêmement précieux, aussi bien pour lutter contre le terrorisme, le séparatisme et d'autres phénomènes qui menacent notre instabilité. Ça, c'est les causes exogènes. Mais il y a des causes endogènes. Les causes endogènes, c'est, on a parlé tout à l'heure de coups d'État. J'étais de ceux qui discutaient avec certains auteurs des coups d'État et qui me disaient que, bon, vous ne dénoncez que les coups d'État militaires, on ne vous avait jamais vu dénoncer les coups d'État institutionnels, les changements de constitution, les troisième mandats et autres. Donc là, ce sont des causes endogènes. Nous devrons nous-mêmes améliorer notre gouvernance, l'état de droit, le respect de nos institutions et au lieu que les élections soient plutôt une solution à des problèmes tels que ça se passe ailleurs, chez nous, malheureusement, par le fait que nous les organisons mal, elles sont souvent plutôt des causes des problèmes. Là également, nous devrons nous regarder en face et de dire qu'autant il y a les interférences étrangères, autant il y a les causes exogènes, autant il y a des responsabilités à notre niveau que nous devrons assumer. Sinon, ne serait-ce que si je prends le cas de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, il y a déjà des coups d'État, il y en aura d'autres coups d'État. Et donc, il est extrêmement important de prendre notre également responsabilité. Vous avez dit que moi, je viens du Tchad. Si vous voyez aujourd'hui l'environnement du Tchad, nous sommes à l'est, le Soudan, vous savez ce qui s'y passe, la Libye, ce n'est pas l'Afrique qui a créé ce qui se passe en Libye. À notre ouest, vous avez le Niger, vous savez le coup d'État au Niger, Boko Haram de l'autre côté, la Centrafrique au sud. C'est pour dire que personne n'est épargné. Et donc, nous avons notre responsabilité. L'extérieur a ses responsabilités. C'est à nous de pouvoir les analyser. Et des forums de ce genre nous donnent l'occasion de pouvoir les inventorier et prendre notre part de responsabilité, reconnaître également nos fautes pour pouvoir les remédier. Sinon, d'autres coups d'État vont survenir. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, His Excellency Anadif, Salah. I think that you point us to think beyond, the developments on the African continent, because obviously, you have developments in the Middle East and some other areas that somehow spill over into the continent. That brings me to you, because, and when I say you, I'm talking about Her Excellency, Dr. Asia Ben Salah Alawi. Your area of expertise and work, beyond doing things diplomatically, is really understanding, the implications of international law and how it sort of interacts, with the current developments that we have. And the argument has also been made that beneath this, phenomenon of terrorism, security threats, you have some socioeconomic, underpinnings that either drive that or end up becoming the effects of these. When you hear both of them speak before you, do you get a sense that there are some experiences, for example, that we can look to, right? If I think of a country like Morocco, what are the experiences, of Morocco in this regard? And do you foresee any strategic insights, that we can draw on, with a certain understanding of moving, the narrative and creating a very positive narrative about the phenomenon at hand?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Stevenson. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Brahim. I'm very happy to see that the small Amadeus think tank that I had contributed to launch over 17 years ago in Paris has reached this stage of development. So congratulations, Brahim, and your team. And thank you for having me once again. Well, your question is absolutely legitimate, because terrorism is a very complex phenomenon. And I think that the strength of Morocco is to have understood from the very start that we did need a comprehensive approach to such a complex issue. And it's thanks to the vision and leadership and determination of His Majesty, not only to answer the demands of a very young population and expectations, but to propel the country into the 21st century, answering the huge challenges we were facing, but with two main pillars: the objectives of building a more democratic state and rule of law, and top priority to human rights. Of course, I will be able to answer all your questions. I'll just mention, because the issue is so huge. And parallelly, build inclusive, sustainable development. And I think that in Morocco, it's not only abstract concepts, because we've been pioneer in the sustainable development with the use of renewable energy, with basic infrastructures and so on, and we can probably discuss this. And the history of development in Morocco could be as well, described very optimistic terms of first ranks, because we are really have the ambition to target the best infrastructure, Tangier Med, Casa Finance City, and so forth, not only for Morocco, but to share as well with our continent. Because solidarity is extremely important in this itinerary. And of course, we are drawing on the very strong national identity, which has been forged by 12th century of nationhood, where the dialogue, common practice of very rich culture is not just a word, and it is really an engine for resilience that we have seen through the pandemic, after the tragedy of the earthquake. So it is important. The most important features to remember, and I will probably just sum up this, is that the strategy, the security strategy that Morocco has adopted is comprehensive, linking the socio-economic development aspects to more operational and short-term measures in order to confront this huge challenge. And it is basic to give to the population real stakes in their society, because security is stemming from the population itself. And we have the chance to have developed as well a vibrant civil society, which is contributing to this tremendous effort. So it's all these aspects, with security governance per se, which has been basically improved through better training, better single command, and so forth. The reform of the religious field, with training of the imams to promote the moderate Islam, and that we are sharing as well with our partners, whether be it in the North or in Africa. Of course, education is the central challenge. It's huge, because what is at stake is not only providing skills and jobs to the predominant youth, but to immunize their mind against extremism and not make them easy prey for very aggressive recruiters, whether it be extremist groups or organized crimes, which in certain states are much more powerful in Africa than the states themselves, because they are facing sometimes weak states. And this is what we wanted really to focus on here in Morocco, education, of course, but as well, a very important thing is to look at the most vulnerable groups of society, women and youth, and we will never insist much on these aspects. But as well, we are building on very large and diversified partnerships. Morocco has not been now at the forefront in Africa, and we are very happy to share with our African sisters and brothers whatever we can provide, namely in food security and so forth, and in all the central topics. But as well, we have developed partnerships much beyond our frontiers, refounding the traditional partnerships with the USA and on green bases with Europe, but reaching out much beyond our frontiers to Russia, China, India, Brazil, with which we are building common interests to approach the two continents in basic issues like food security once again. And I think that the prospect of the Dakhla port, which will be absolutely substantial to approach Africa with Europe and so forth, will be as well very important for Brazil. I would like to finish just saying that Morocco's geopolitical equilibrium is based on three pillars: the Mediterranean dimension in the north, the Saharan and Atlantic one in the south and beyond, of course, and the main development. The Mediterranean dimension has been very much developed because we have made an end to black market and black economy. And the Saharan dimension, Atlantic, has been very much promoted by the proactive approach of Morocco to the Sahara question, the autonomy plan, which has been considered since 2007 as a credible base for solution in the region, and creating dynamics for a better recognition of our sovereignty, where we have a huge deficit, legacy of the protectorate. And of course, last but not least, the African policy of Morocco, which is comforting, enhancing this aspect. And we do hope that we can project some kind of stability into our sister and brothers in Africa from our experience, which is, of course, based on very specific assets, but as well, which some of the aspects can be adapted and probably scaled up in order to provide more stability in the continent. Thank you.
Please, you can show some appreciation for those thoughts. And it's actually quite refreshing to hear, what has been done internally in areas of education. And you're not limiting this to only formal education. You're thinking religious re-education, bringing in religious leaders, and what that ultimately means. There are some socioeconomic issues as well being addressed. And you're thinking about this internally and externally. Let me go to His Excellency Tangier. So when you hear her and you think about the role of, international, partnerships towards addressing, the challenge of separatism, terrorism, and political instability. I mean, I know Senegal has not been a hotbed, despite, the ECOWAS region, being fraught with these constraints. But what do you see, from Senegal's perspective? What do you see?
Merci beaucoup. Je voudrais féliciter nos amis de MEDays pour cette chance qu'ils nous donnent chaque année de nous retrouver pour aborder des questions importantes concernant la situation du continent africain. Donc, félicitations et bravo et bonne continuation. Les thèmes qu'on nous a proposés constituent aujourd'hui j'allais dire les maladies principales du continent africain, mais comme il y a tellement de maladies qu'il est difficile de choisir celles qui sont principales et celles qui ne le sont pas. Mais le séparatisme, le terrorisme, l'instabilité et les crises institutionnelles, on ne peut pas trouver mieux pour parler de la grave situation du continent africain. Maintenant, il faudrait ajouter une crise majeure dont on ne parle pas beaucoup, c'est la crise qui affecte la jeunesse africaine. Si nous avons 1,3 milliard d'habitants et si nous avons 70% de jeunes, ça veut dire que nous avons 1 milliard de jeunes Africains, 1 milliard. Ça veut dire 2 milliards de bras. Et on ne peut pas avoir 40% des ressources naturelles du monde, avoir 2 milliards de bras et être incapable de se développer. Il y a quelque chose qui ne fonctionne pas dans les choix que nous avons faits et dans les paradigmes du développement de l'Afrique. Une des questions fondamentales, encore, disons un autre point très grave, c'est la question de l'électricité, par exemple. 600 millions d'Africains n'ont pas accès à l'électricité. Alors que nous avons toutes les ressources hydriques du monde, nous avions les moyens d'être fournisseurs d'électricité quasiment, non seulement à tout le continent, mais aller au-delà. Donc, le paradigme de développement de l'Afrique, je l'ai toujours dit, pensé, et je vais continuer de le penser jusqu'à ce qu'on décide de regarder les choses en face. Ce paradigme est erroné. Et ce n'est pas parce qu'on continue, on persiste, on insiste, que le paradigme, ce qui est faux, va devenir vrai. Il faut absolument que les Africains acceptent qu'il y a quelque chose qui ne fonctionne pas dans notre système. Alors, le séparatisme. Moi, je viens d'un pays, le Sénégal, qui a eu à faire face au séparatisme dans le sud de notre pays. Et je viens dans un pays, le Maroc, qui a fait face et qui se bat de façon valeureuse contre, effectivement, le séparatisme dans le sud, ou en tout cas un séparatisme qu'on veut lui imposer. Alors, c'est pour dire que la question du séparatisme est une question très, très actuelle et centrale pour le futur de l'Afrique. Je suis personnellement contre le séparatisme, non pas parce que c'est dans mon pays et dans un pays ami comme le Maroc, mais parce que depuis le début, nous avons grandi en combattant la balkanisation de l'Afrique. Quand les chefs d'État africains parlaient d'unir le continent africain, ils l'ont fait devant 32 pays en 1963. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes 54 États et les gens continuent de vouloir créer de nouveaux États à gauche et à droite et à nous obliger à créer des situations absolument incroyables. Le Maroc et le Sénégal sont peut-être les seuls pays au monde qui ont un nord et à qui on refuse un sud. C'est des pays qui ont un nord mais qui n'ont pas de sud. C'est totalement insensé. Donc, il y a un problème dans le séparatisme. Moi, je théorise que si on continue, ceux qui veulent fractionner le Nigeria, veulent fractionner la RDC, veulent briser nos États, ils arriveront à 70 États, 80 États, et ça va devenir totalement, absolument invivable et ingérable. Donc, s'opposer au séparatisme, c'est non seulement se battre pour l'unité de l'Afrique, mais c'est comprendre le piège qu'il y a à ramener ce genre de débat dans le continent. Chaque région du continent peut donner 1001 raisons pour prétendre être différent. Le droit à la différence, la reconnaissance de la différence ne nous amène pas à dire qu'il faut créer dans chaque pays plusieurs États. On ne s'en sortira pas. Donc il faut que l'Afrique arrête. Deuxième problème très grave, le terrorisme. J'ai toujours pensé, dans le cadre de l'Institut panafricain de stratégie que nous avons créé à Dakar, paix, sécurité, gouvernance, nous avons réfléchi, nous avons pensé, nous avons fait des brainstorming. Le terrorisme, dès le départ, quand la crise de la Libye s'est présentée à nous, nous avons averti. L'Afrique va vers une tragédie si on n'arrête pas cela au départ. Ça n'a pas été fait. Ça n'a pas été fait. Et on s'est retrouvé aujourd'hui avec un terrorisme qui a métastasé presque partout dans le continent. Si on nous dit qu'au Nigeria, Boko Haram a fait 40 000 morts, 40 000 victimes, est-ce que ce n'est pas un génocide véritablement? En tout cas, c'est des massacres à un niveau extraordinaire. Le Burkina Faso, en 2 ans, 3 ans d'attaques terroristes, on nous dit qu'ils sont à 10 000 victimes. On massacre, on tue. Chaque matin, chaque jour, on entend des attaques contre des villageois, contre des civils désarmés. Et moi, je me suis plaint et j'ai trouvé malheureux que la CEDEAO, que les pays de la sous-région ouest-africaine n'aient pas levé une armée pour entrer au Burkina et apporter leur soutien au peuple burkinabé, à l'État burkinabé, pour contrer les terroristes. On l'a fait au Mali, on l'a fait dans des formes que nous savons, ça n'a pas réussi, et on a laissé faire au Burkina. Et ça continue. Aujourd'hui, le nord du Togo, le nord du Bénin, partout. jusqu'en RDC, jusqu'au Mozambique, les terroristes s'installent un peu partout. Ils ne sont pas venus pour des mobiles religieux. Ils sont venus parce que nous avons des ressources. Nous sommes le continent qui a probablement le plus de ressources dans le monde. Nous avons aussi de l'eau, nous avons des forêts, nous avons énormément de richesses. C'est comme s'ils disaient, puisque les Africains, Dieu les a dotés de tout cela, et ils ne sont pas intéressés, nous on est intéressés. Donc ils viennent s'installer. Ils sont purement dans l'économie, dans le contrôle, dans la domination, et parfois avec des éléments de génocide contre notre peuple. Je pense qu'il faut avoir le courage de le dire. Quand l'Union africaine programme un sommet sur le terrorisme, et depuis lors n'arrive pas à tenir ce sommet, il y a un problème. Est-ce que les Africains sont prêts à apporter une réponse adéquate à cette crise du terrorisme, ou est-ce qu'on va laisser faire? Pendant qu'on réfléchit sur ça, on nous amène maintenant les coups d'État. On est à 6 coups d'État, retour des coups d'État, instabilité. Et pensant à la jeunesse africaine, je dis que cette jeunesse, on lui a enlevé 3 droits fondamentaux. Le droit au rêve, le droit à l'espoir, le droit à l'avenir. Et c'est pour ça qu'ils meurent dans les océans, qu'ils meurent dans les déserts. Donc nous sommes dans une situation où le leadership, qui à côté de la balkanisation, a été toujours un grand problème de l'Afrique, le leadership. L'Afrique a un sérieux problème de leadership. Nous ne pouvons pas avoir tout ce que nous avons, tout ce que la nature nous a réservé, et nous retrouver dans la situation dans laquelle nous sommes. Un pays comme la Centrafrique, que je respecte beaucoup et dont je connais les qualités de l'intelligentsia et autres, s'il y a 8% de la population qui ont accès à l'électricité, après 63 ans d'indépendance, il y a un problème. Il y a un problème dans notre façon de fonctionner. C'est un pays qui a du diamant, qui a du pétrole, qui a un fleuve, un grand fleuve, qui a des ressources hydriques, et qui a une petite population et qui a 600 000 km². Comment est-ce qu'on peut justifier qu'après 63 d'indépendance, on en soit là? Et là, c'est pour ça que quand notre ami m'a demandé qu'est-ce que je pense des partnerships extérieurs, des partenariats extérieurs, ma première réflexion, c'est de dire, je pense d'abord aux Africains, aux partenariats internes entre Africains. Qu'est-ce que nous sommes prêts à faire ensemble pour arrêter la tragédie, arrêter les malheurs qui s'abattent sur notre continent? C'est comme si nous étions heureux d'être malheureux. Il faut qu'on arrête ça. Il faut absolument qu'on arrête ça. Merci.
Thank you again, for those, insightful reflections. So you also, at a point, draw attention to our endowment of natural resources, our inability to, leverage that to provide opportunities for young people. But also any country that has got natural resources is prone to having, sporadic, spurts of challenges that may undermine, political stability. I think it was Professor Paul Collier, who had written about natural resources and the implications for, political economy and institutions. And he uses Africa as an example. I tend to refuse to accept that we have resources and so we must fight. We must almost damage, democratic institutions. But that brings me to you, His Excellency Abdirazak. So clearly, if you follow from His Excellency Gadieu, we're thinking about Africans thinking for Africans and deploying solutions. I think that's the note on which he ends, that we must do things for ourselves, think internally before we start thinking about any potential, external partnerships. And that has written all over it, the subject of inclusivity in decision-making, whether it's bringing young people into the conversation or people who may be the north-south divide, or resource-rich areas and non-resource-rich areas. I mean, how does that look like for you? You've been in Somalia, you've been, foreign affairs, so I'm sure you engage with a lot of young people and different sects of the society, and now, in your current capacity. I mean, how does that inclusivity and design, look like? Whether it's, from a regional or continental perspective, what does that look like for you?
Thank you, Patrick, and the distinguished delegates and respected colleagues. I'm honored to address this important subject, which is of paramount importance to the future of our continent. Just to show you the importance of this subject, you can see how this hole has just filled up. with young people, academians, practitioners, and everyone has come to hear and discuss, to be part of this very discussion, although there are many other subjects going on. I also would like to thank Ibrahim and the Amadeus Institute for organizing such a relevant topics for us to discuss in a South-South cooperation. And as you said, I'm going to share some of the experiences that we have in the continent, and particularly in Somalia. So as a former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Somalia, I bring not only my personal experience, but the collective aspirations of a people who have endured the ramifications of these issues. And allow me to make just 2 points to sum up all of these issues. And first is the importance of strengthening institutional capacities of governance to effectively combat the intertwined challenges of separatism, terrorism, interference, and political instability. It is imperative to strengthen the institutional capacities and governance structures across the African nations. This involves not only fortifying the rule of law or democratic processes, but ensuring that these institutions are inclusive, transparent, and responsive to the needs of all citizens. This is something that Ms. Alawi also alluded to earlier. To elaborate on this point and to draw from Somalia's journey and the broader African context, it is clear that the absence of robust institutions often paves the way for the growth of separatism and terrorism. When governments are weak, non-state actors find fertile ground. Therefore, we should focus on enhancing institutional frameworks that promote political inclusion, safeguarding human rights, and facilitate equitable socioeconomic development. Additionally, it's crucial to invest in the capacity building initiatives that empower local governance structures, enabling them to manage and resolve conflicts at the local level. The second point that I wanted to make is the promotion of regional cooperation and addressing foreign interference. My experience both in the realm of international diplomacy and within the context of Somalia's challenge have reinforced my belief in the power of collective action at the regional solidarity. The issue of foreign interference in African affairs is a critical aspect that exacerbates separatism, terrorism, and political instability. To counter this, therefore, we must enhance regional cooperation and assert the principle of African solutions to African problems. Through unified and concerted efforts, we can effectively then address the external factors contributing to instability in our continent. So regional bodies like the African Union and the sub-regional organizations play a vital role in this regard. And we must leverage these platforms to foster a unified stance against external interference and promote information sharing and coordination of security strategies. Furthermore, enhancing economic integration and interdependence among African states can reduce the vulnerability to external influences. So to sum up, one angle is what we're doing at the national level and how we're strengthening those institutions, both at the national and local level. And the second angle is to strengthen the regional cooperation at the African Union level and sub-regional levels. And those are some of the ways that we can counter these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those thoughts. So the point you make about strengthening the capacity of local actors, because a lot of the time they're a lot closer to the population than the Pan-African and the regional actors, I think is very important and ties into the point that Her Excellency Dr. Alawi mentioned earlier about the experience of Morocco with roping in religious leaders, for example, who are a lot closer to the population. I think that's a very instructive point. And you also talk about, regional bodies, and I'll be coming that, to that in the second round of the conversation, because there's a lot of criticism, around the work of, and I'm not going to put you on the spot, but ECOWAS and, the African Union. And I mean, you hear a lot of young people, and those are the questions they're asking, Is it that the AU can't do anything? And is it that, the ECOWAS, cannot do anything, about the challenges we're confronted with? So perhaps I'll give you a quick chance. I mean, as you've heard from all of them, clearly the regional institutions have got a role to play if we have to go the route that has been suggested by His Excellency Abdirazak, that there is, I mean, we can't downplay the relevance of the regional institutions in, whether it's on the economic side, on the political side, in dealing with the problem, right? And I know you did mention some of those, but specifically, very briefly, if you can indicate to us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Hearing from my colleagues, it brings me down to only one issue here that is affecting Africa. That is good governance. Good governance is key, and in my opinion, that is what we should be looking at very, very critically. In the ECOWAS region, we have had a couple of coup d'etats, but everybody is focusing on military coups. But what about the constitutional coups? What about the constitutional coup d'etats? You see a sitting president, probably on his second and final term, and then he begins to talk about constitutional amendments to keep him in power. What are we going to do about it? Because if there is a constitutional coup, in my opinion, it's no different from military coup at all. So those are the issues I believe the African Union, the ECOWAS, and all regional bodies must be looking at very, very seriously. In the ECOWAS region, we have a strategy, a comprehensive strategy that is bordered on regional cooperation, sharing of intelligence, addressing socio-economic challenges and inequalities that fuel separatist and terrorist movements, such as poverty, unemployment, corruption, underdevelopment, environmental degradation. Every day we see young people leaving Africa to Europe. Some of them, and most of them, losing their lives in the Mediterranean. Why? It's because we are not creating the right atmosphere. We are not creating the opportunities for them. We are not creating the level playing field. So it boils down to governance, Mr. Moderator. And I strongly believe that we should be looking at that much, much more seriously. There's a lot of progress in Africa. If you really take into consideration what has happened in the past, we have made a lot of progress. But I believe we should do more. And by doing more, we must be strong enough to tell a leader in his face that you had 2 terms of 5 years each, your term is finished and you should leave. We cannot continue to pamper leaders who try to stay in power forever. We should not. We should go by the Constitution, because if you decide to amend the Constitution just for you to stay in power, then you might as well invite the military to come in. And we have found out also that in almost all the areas, all the countries that have been military coups, there have been serious jubilation of civilians after those military coups. Why? We should begin to ask ourselves, especially we, the leaders, we should begin to ask ourselves, why would civilians that we are supposed to be leading support military coup d'etats? You see them dancing on the streets in our cities. That is because, in most cases, they are just fed up with us. They are fed up with us because we have not been governing very well.
Right. So there's an interesting fine line there when you think of the role of, the African Union, ECOWAS, and other regional actors, versus what somebody may argue is perhaps, the sovereignty of the state, to sort of do things by its own rules, where those lines are. But I'll come to you, for your thoughts on that. Excellency Alawi, so I saw you making a lot of notes. And, as you hear him and you think of, the way forward, I know you're very big on changing the narrative and celebrating examples of things that we're doing that well. How does that fit in for you?
Well, I think we have a lot of lessons, to learn from what's going on, because Africa is deploring the lack of representativity on the higher international community, especially in the Security Council. But I think that the African Union should start by doing its own homework, which means there is a huge room for improvement, for the capacity building to tackle the difficult issues that cannot be dealt with by states alone. Conflict resolution, we are very far from it, and as well to promote concrete actions in the field of fighting climate change, which is absolutely basic and which threatens all of African countries, and promote the, His Excellency Mr. Gadio was mentioning 600 million, not having things. But you understand that 6 million population do not have clean stoves in Africa, which means that African women cannot cook on clean devices. They are destroying the forests because they have no alternatives. So we have to concentrate on concrete building issues which will individually and collectively save us. And unfortunately, this will divert from concentrating on negativities and on personal interests of groups, which are, of course, actioned by, as well, international powers and regional powers and interference. So we have really to build on positive issues. That's why I like examples. For instance, in the COP22 already, His Majesty have put on initiative for Blue Fund for Congo. Congo is the second lung of the planet, but there are as well 35 million population who are concerned by the improvement of this huge basin, and it has just been operationalized in COP27. So this is good news, but still we have really to concentrate on these positive issues. And this will allow us to go beyond our small differences, which are really used to divide the populations and the groups. There is the other issue which is absolutely central. I mentioned it very briefly. It's food security. We are working in the Malabo-Montpellier Forum, which I chair with, I co-chair with His Excellency Mariam Halin Desalegn, former Prime Minister of Ethiopia, on providing to Africa examples to be able to use innovation to transform food systems for the benefit of all the African populations. And Africa is learning from Africa because we are giving success stories which have been achieved by different countries and from which the other can learn. So if we could try, to bring hardcore of people to concentrate, and states to concentrate on these positive issues, we could go beyond. Because if we dwell on what divides us, we will never progress. This is our main difficulty, is to go beyond and look at the day after. And this is the essence of, unfortunately, conflict and instability. It is your energy, your day-to-day agenda is eaten up just by surviving and trying to make things function. So despite this difficulty, we still should have in mind the day after and look at the future. Otherwise, we will be all overwhelmed by climate change, by food insecurity, by conflict, and by all the pleas that are really invading Africa.
Thank you very much for those thoughts. So you're not only thinking of today, you're making us understand that much as we're discussing the problem today, there are constraints that if we don't address, perhaps may exacerbate the situation for tomorrow. Let me go to you, His Excellency Anadif, Saleh from Chad. So I think a point was made earlier about, post-conflict reconstruction. So how are we sort of building social cohesion among a population that celebrates, for example, the uncontemplated changes in a political regime, right? How do we do that? How do we build cohesion? Because you can't keep having the perpetual cycle continue. So once that's happened, how do we build, cohesion among the population to ensure that, it does not happen again, and we forge ahead, and build the institutions that Her Excellency just talked about, to address some of the socioeconomic constraints that we have looking forward?
Merci beaucoup. Je crois que tout à l'heure, quand on faisait le diagnostic des conflits, on avait parlé de cette distribution des richesses et des pouvoirs. Souvent, le conflit, c'est effectivement cette question de répartition des richesses et de pouvoirs, le sous-développement. Et il n'y a pas de solution miracle. Il faut qu'il y ait un leadership qui, à un moment ou un autre, arrive à penser que sans la justice sociale, il ne peut pas avoir de développement, il ne peut pas avoir de cohésion sociale, il ne peut pas avoir d'unité. Il faut donc tirer les leçons des causes de nos conflits en Afrique. Et donc, le cas de l'un des pays, effectivement, où nous avons connu plus d'une trentaine d'années de guerre, je l'ai vu tout à l'heure, c'est vrai qu'il y a des interférences extérieures, mais qui ne justifient pas tout. Il faudrait aussi des fois qu'on prenne nos responsabilités intérieures, et c'est ce que nous sommes en train de faire au niveau du Tchad, où tout à l'heure, Madame avait parlé de la décentralisation. Nous avons hérité d'un système jacobien qui fait que pour un pays où entre la capitale et certaines petites contrées, il y a à peu près 2000 kilomètres. Et toutes les décisions sont attendues de la capitale. Donc il y a moins de contraintes administratives, plus de décentralisation où les gens auront une certaine autonomie de leurs décisions, ils auront une autonomie financière, administrative, où ils auront le droit de désigner leurs responsables, leur demander des comptes. Et ce sont des choses basiques, en fait. Mais il faut avoir un leadership qui soit visionnaire, qui, en tout cas, prenne en compte ces revendications légitimes, la question de l'accès à l'eau, la question de l'accès aux services de base minimum. Et donc, l'autre leçon que nous avons tirée, c'est que même les terroristes les terroristes viennent s'engouffrer là où il y a une population pauvre, là où il y a une population ignorée, isolée de la capitale, et qui viennent quelquefois, ils prennent même la place de l'État, en fait. Ils se convertissent à des gens qui offrent des services, qui se mêlent de la population, et finalement, la population qui était éloignée des centres de décision se trouve donc prise en otage par ces terroristes. Donc, moi, je crois l'expérience que nous sommes en train de vivre, c'est que, nous avons tiré un certain nombre de leçons des causes de nos conflits. Nous sommes en train d'y remédier en associant tout le monde, ne laisser personne au bord de la route. Et nous demeurons donc vigilants. Et pour ce qui est de la démocratie, de façon générale, moi, je suis de ceux qui pensent que chaque pays a son modèle. Il n'y a pas de modèle à imposer, parce qu'on a vu même les modèles occidentaux qui ont montré leurs limites. Donc, c'est basé sur sa propre expérience et surtout obtenir l'adhésion de la majorité, créer en tout cas un modèle de développement qui associe tout le monde et qui arrive à faire en sorte que chacun se sente concerné par ce qui se passe, trouve son compte, que ce soit, comme je l'ai dit, en matière de partage du pouvoir, partage de ressources, et la cohésion sociale, la réconciliation nationale, la reconstruction post-conflit aussi se nourrissent de ces réalités, et je crois que nous sommes, le cadre, comme je l'ai dit, nous sommes en train de tirer des leçons de notre parcours, de notre expérience, et jusqu'à là, ça produit des résultats, en tout cas positifs. Comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, nous sommes dans une sous-région où nous sommes un îlot au milieu de tout un océan de conflits. Ce n'est pas facile, mais en tout cas, l'expérience pour le moment fait que nous croyons à ce modèle que nous sommes en train d'emprunter et nous sommes optimistes tout en disant tout simplement que nous croyons plutôt, quel que soit ce que le cadre fait, à une Afrique intégrée au sein de laquelle nous pouvons être un élément qui contribuera à l'unité, à l'intégration de l'Afrique. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much for those thoughts. So, Africans must learn from Africans on, post-conflict, resolution mechanisms. I'm going to leave the two of you, His Excellencies Gadio and Abdirazak, to the audience, right? Hopefully they don't grill you too much, but we'll open up for questions. We're running out of time. Please limit your questions, if you can, to a minute so that we can optimize the rest of the time to respond to them. And I'll take two. In the interest of gender equity, I'd like to take one question from a man and another from a woman. But I see only the hands of men up. So I'll take a hand here. So I'll take you. Can I balance? Is there a female hand up? Let me be absolutely sure about that. Okay, the women look like they're ceding their seats. They're seating. There's a hand on the far right.
Patrick, there's a hand over there.
Okay, great. So I will take you, and then I will take him. Just two questions, so we can wrap up. Can we have a microphone? Yes.
Merci, monsieur le modérateur. Merci aux panélistes qui nous ont décrit cette Afrique de multicrises avec précision. Je voudrais poser une question, séparatisme, terrorisme. Étant donné que c'est le séparatisme qui fait l'appel d'air au terrorisme. Et malheureusement, quand on fait une cartographie du séparatisme, je constate, et c'est une question que je pose à M. Gadio, que certains pays minés par le séparatisme continuent à reconnaître du séparatisme ailleurs, et notamment dans le Grand Maghreb. Je me limiterai à l'Angola, au Mozambique, à l'Éthiopie, et j'en oublie. Ne trouvez-vous pas que cette incohérence de ces pays que eux-mêmes sont victimes de cette velléité terroriste continuent à la soutenir ailleurs? Et une question pour M. Tunis, évidemment. vous avez parlé des changements inconstitutionnels, manière euphémiste de parler du coup d'État malheureusement. Pourquoi cette réminiscence demeure dans l'Afrique francophone? Et je vous remercie.
Thank you very much for those questions. Let me take the hand that was at the back. There was a lady whose hand was at the back. Let me take that, and then I'll come to you, His Excellency Gadier. I think this particular question was addressed to you. And then we shall do His Excellency Abdulrazak. Yes, please, your question.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. J'étais vraiment très touchée et j'ai appris pas mal de choses avec vous ce matin. Mais je voudrais m'adresser à vous sur le terrorisme, de savoir comment on peut le combattre. C'est pas aussi facile qu'on croit, parce que j'ai payé le prix le plus cher, que j'ai perdu mon fils à cause du terrorisme. On dit de la misère ou de la pauvreté ou quoi que ce soit, mais la personne qui a tué mon fils, il est né dans un pays européen, il a été dans les écoles européennes, et il manquait de rien, mais il est tourné, vraiment devenu un homme qui a tué 7 victimes gratuitement. Je pense aujourd'hui, j'ai pas beaucoup d'expérience, j'ai que 11 ans sur le terrain, parce que j'ai fondé une association AIMAD pour la jeunesse et la paix. Et aujourd'hui, je vois cette jeunesse, elle est complètement perdue, certaines jeunesses. Ils ont besoin d'être accompagnés, d'être aidés, éduqués, parce que la jeunesse, c'est l'avenir de demain. Je pense qu'on doit penser tous à cette jeunesse. Cette jeunesse, elle est vraiment stressée, elle est vraiment angoissée, et on doit les accompagner dans les écoles, l'éducation, l'amour surtout, parce que c'est eux l'avenir de demain.
If you can make it brief.
Voilà ma question qui était posée. Pour combattre le terrorisme, aujourd'hui, il faut accompagner la jeunesse. C'est très important. Merci.
Thank you very much. So His Excellency Gadio, we can do this in 30 seconds and 30 seconds, just to wrap up. I know it's not a 30-second question.
30 seconds. All right. So, first of all, Madame, I'm sorry to hear about your loss, but the questions raised have some commonalities, whether it is the issue of separatism or terrorism. And one thing that is the basis for all of this, to me, is that governments need to deliver for their people. We need governments and institutions that are responsive to the needs of all citizens. That way, it doesn't create the need for young people to get on the high seas trying to seek better life elsewhere. If life is good here, then I have no need to go to these places. And Morocco is really a very good example of this. You have clean roads, you have electricity that is efficient, you have trains that I have not even seen in the United States, high-speed trains. So you have government that is delivering, even in the middle of the Sahara, and building ports, creating economic opportunities for all. So this is one way to counter. There are no proven methods but we can see that these commonalities. And, in the case of separatism, particularly, I can relate to this as I come from Somalia. We have an area called Somaliland that for 30 years has been trying, and this is like an elite that thought by carving out an area of the country for themselves and putting grievances against the previous government would create a state, a new country in Africa. But what has happened? This year, that has crumbled along family lines. And the largest number of Somalis for a long time have been displaced, killed, and so forth. So if governments, in the case of Somalia, we had a government that has been absent for 30 years, and now the state is being reconstituted. Right. But you know, if you had a government that was responsive to the needs of the people, this would not be there. Just one last point. Education, Madame, is very important, but people need to see, especially young people, real practicalities of what this means. It's not education about just learning math and science and those things, but what they see in the living day-to-day, so that I'm not convinced by a radical extremist that is recruiting me to go to fight some global issue. Do I have that sort of education? So, right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abdirazak, His Excellency. Let's have 30 seconds. I've been prompted, we're out of time. His Excellency Gadjo.
Yes. 30 secondes, c'est un encouragement à faire 3 minutes parce que mon frère sait que 30 secondes, ce n'est pas réaliste. Non, y a 2 points. La question très importante posée par notre frère, pourquoi des pays qui ont souffert du séparatisme soutiennent le séparatisme ailleurs? Ça, c'est véritablement la force de l'idéologie et de la politique. Cette force fait faire des choses qui sont totalement insensées. L'Afrique a souffert de tout cela. Et moi, ce qui me touche, c'est que des leaders africains ont très tôt dit, dès les années 60, début des années 60, qu'il faut éviter de créer des États nains et des États non viables. Ça, c'est Cheikh Anta Diop. Et il a averti nos dirigeants qu'on se retrouvait dans la situation actuelle où on va fractionner l'Afrique en petits morceaux, etc. Chacun va vouloir avoir sa petite parcelle à diriger et il faut arrêter ça. Et il avait raison, on se retrouve dans cette situation. Et un pays comme le Maroc aujourd'hui, à mon avis, avec l'excellent travail qui est fait, après 63 ans d'indépendance, je dis toujours, il n'y a pas un seul pays africain émergent. Mais le Maroc est le seul pays africain, à mon avis, qui tape à la porte de l'émergence. Le Maroc est en train de faire un excellent travail. Et beaucoup de pays d'Afrique, d'ailleurs, s'inspirent de plus en plus du Maroc. Donc, on laisse le Maroc tranquille, qu'on ne vienne pas essayer de découper, qu'on ne vienne pas essayer de paralyser la dynamique du Maroc et qu'on laisse ce pays continuer à bâtir son unité, son intégrité. Et ce qui est intéressant, c'est que le Maroc passe son temps aussi à tendre la main aux autres pays africains, à apporter ses compétences, son expertise et à apporter son appui. Un dernier point, très rapidement, sur ce qu'a dit notre sœur. Moi, chaque fois, j'ai été dubitatif quand on dit que le terrorisme est lié strictement à la pauvreté ou bien que le lien est mécanique. Pourquoi on est resté pauvre de 60 à 2000 et on n'avait pas d'attaque terroriste? Et tout d'un coup, une crise mondiale se met en place et on commence à nous attaquer. Et donc, je pense que c'est plus lié à la géopolitique mondiale qui est en train de se restructurer et c'est lié aux frustrations et à l'injustice. Ce qui se passe dans Gaza aujourd'hui, que nous regardons tous à la télé, en ne dormant pas si on est des êtres humains, en vivant une profonde indignation pour un massacre filmé, ouvertement et offert au monde entier, ça crée des réactions chez les jeunes, des jeunes qui ne supportent pas l'injustice. 1 milliard de jeunes africains qui marchent sur de l'or, du diamant, du pétrole, du gaz, du coltan, du cobalt, de tout ce qu'on veut, et on leur dit, nos dirigeants passent leur temps à leur dire, écoutez, il faut nous comprendre, nous sommes des pays pauvres. Comment peut-on dire à quelqu'un qui est aussi riche qu'il est pauvre? C'est pour ça que nos jeunes... C'est pour cela que nos jeunes, comme je dis, aujourd'hui, ils ont quasiment tourné le dos à l'Afrique. C'est comme ils n'ont plus aucun espoir dans ce continent. Et ça, c'est un drame sur lequel nous devons réfléchir. Dernier point, les femmes africaines. Elles ont sauvé l'Afrique de tout. Esclavage, colonisation, néocolonisation. Les femmes africaines, leur leadership aujourd'hui peut offrir une alternative en termes de masculinité positive. Je n'ai pas de problème pour dire que les femmes ont peut-être la clé des problèmes de l'Afrique. Donnons-leur une chance. Parce que c'est elles qui, fondamentalement, en toutes circonstances, restent des humains, des êtres humains capables d'humilité, capables de tout, mais surtout capables de sacrifice. Nos femmes sont magnifiques et nous devons compter sur elles. Merci.
Thank you very much. No, I think you can do better. It's a very good note. Please put your hands together for them once again. It's a good note on which to close this panel. And this was just to stimulate some ideas that I think we can continue to chew on, in our halls, and while we have lunch later. So hopefully we have been able to address, some of the subject. We know we can't exhaust all the questions. We say thank you to the translators for us, because other than that, some of us would have been struggling. And thank you, the audience, for also having taken part in this conversation. Thank you, and see you soon.